It's Tim Kawakami right off the rip, and we appreciate your time, Tim. Thank you for joining us here right in our opening segment. You were down there. You saw what just happened at Chase Center. To me, the biggest takeaway was that Steve Kerr was clearly circling the wagons around Jordan Poole, and he was just stepping on any notion that Jordan Poole did something inappropriate here or has changed his attitude in training camp, and that was the big takeaway, in my mind, that Steve Kerr and the Golden State Warriors seem clearly in Camp Jordan Poole.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good call there, Damon. I mean, they're reacting to a report. There was a report by a very respected writer who last night tweeted that, some of this was in reaction to Jordan Poole's attitude because he's about to get this new deal. And, hey, that sounded like it could be true. I didn't, I had certainly not heard that, but the Warriors were actively leaping out, and I believe very much disagree with that, not just Steve Kerr. Bob Myers made a slight reference to it. I think Steph Curry made a reference to it. They don't believe. Hey, Jordan Poole is, he's a cocky guy. He's somebody you could see maybe annoying people in a scrimmage or in a pickup game or the first team versus second team. That's a real thing, but that doesn't mean, first of all, I think the veterans, most of them kind of like that because he's not shrinking. He's stepping up to the challenge. He's trying to get at him. He's somebody they can trust in a under fire in a tough situation because they've seen it in practice. And secondly, it doesn't mean that he should get punched, right? I mean, I think there are a couple clear lines here where Bob Myers, Steve Kerr, for sure. I had to leave. I wasn't there for Curry. I'm driving down to 49ers, by the way, so I'm multi-sporting it today. But I heard Steph on the radio, your radio station, in fact, and I think the lines are, they love Draymond, they know how important he is, but this was over the line, and if it had anything to do with the contract, they don't think it did, but no one's saying it absolutely for sure wasn't. But if it had something to do with the contract, it wasn't Jordan Poole's fault. I think those were the very, very bright line, points here that they wanted to get across. And I think they did. And we'll see what Jordan Poole and Draymond Green say about this. They both, pointedly were not there today at the presser. Jordan Poole practiced, and Draymond Green showed up for practice, apologized to the team, and then left, or was excused, and whichever you want to say it. But, yes, I think the Jordan Poole factor of this is the main guys on the Warriors are saying this was not his fault. This is on Draymond. And I think that's a good thing to kind of remember going forward as we kind of consider this. As contracts happen or don't happen, as the team plays out as it does, we'll see. But this one, they were saying, is not on Jordan Poole.
Does that preclude, though, the notion that there is sort of some generational tension? If it's not contractual, if it's not out and out, we're both fighting for the same pile of money at the end of the year. Did they do enough to discourage the notion that this is simply a generational argument between a guy whose team this may eventually be and a member of the old guard whose team it currently is?
Really, I was asking about that. I read an interesting column about that last night and complimented it, and then I have to be on the guy's radio show. I have to rethink my priorities here. But
you ought to be ashamed of yourself, quite frankly.
Yeah, I know. I am ashamed of myself. But no, I do think there is. I mean, they've made it as clear as possible. The first team is, the guys who won all the championships. Jordan Poole's won them too, but he's on the second team, and that's Poole, Moody, Kuminga, Wiseman. You can name the guys. Even Chencho's over there, but he's kind of to the side. Like, this is a generational thing, and it's, as Kerr put it, like, you almost never have it. Like, you don't never have a bunch of guys who won a ton of championships together, right? This is rare. 3-4 guys who won all the championships together, and then you have 4, 5, 6 young guys who are all very talented. 22 might be, I think Poole at 22 is the oldest. Wiseman's 21. Bunch of guys are 20. Kuminga, they're all about to turn 20. Like, you just don't ever have a situation like this. So I think there is absolutely a generational, I wouldn't say a schism. There's pressures. There's these young guys know for them to get more playing time, for them to get more money, this is, some of the older guys are going to have to get moved aside, and they're not bashful about, at least a couple of them are not bashful about saying, okay, maybe it's my time. Just on the practice court. I'm not saying publicly, I'm not saying that this is their declarations. I'm just saying these things kind of hash out on the practice court where, Jordan Poole maybe gets hot and telling them, listen, it's my time, guys. And maybe he's not exactly literally saying it, but he kind of is. And I do think even when they say it's not contractual related, it might not be you're getting it and I'm not. It's more, yes, it's the pressures of it. Like they know this thing's coming down. I've written about it several times. Like this thing's coming down in a year. They have $25 million that they're going to have to shave off next year if they give Poole a big deal this year. And we'll see. October 17th is the deadline. I think it's likely that Poole signs. They're going to have to. Somebody's not going to be around among the group of big money players that we know. There's very no other way to see it, and I think they feel that. That doesn't mean it's about today or tomorrow or the next day. It means they know this is coming, and it doesn't have to be spelled out for them. It's just they see it, and talented players looking at a pie, looking at playing time, looking at who's the starter and who plays at the end of the half and who plays at the end of the game. It's natural. I think it's competitive. You don't want players who shy away from that. You don't want creaking violence, but sometimes it's going to blow up. It's going to explode, and we'll see if it continues. And I think by the seriousness of Bob Myers and Steve Kerr and Steph Curry's tone today, you understand that they realize this could be serious. They also realize they can, leadership, which is obviously Steph Curry's the number one part of that, as they all said. It can be gotten through. They've gotten through this, but doesn't mean it's guaranteed to be gotten through this time. And maybe the sheer volume of it, the number of young players they have. And these are not, Draymond's several years older than he was when he went off on Durant. And guess who they picked in Draymond versus Durant, by the way? They picked Durant. They didn't re-sign Durant, but that was a pretty clear little call there. And Draymond is several years past that. So, where's the balance on that? We'll find out. I don't know. They don't have to make the decision right now. But there are a lot of things dropping into the scales right now. And as is typical with the Warriors, it's all playing out in front of us.
Is there anything to be taken from the notion that they came out today as quickly as they did to try to address the thing rather than try to sort of finesse it with a lot of no comments or we'll keep this internal? I mean, they did send out their three biggest guns to address this.
Yeah, I think they thought about it. I mean, let's put this like, they normally tell us that when people are going to be available and what their practice is the day before. And today they didn't do it until this morning. It probably was some internal discussion about that. That's just me interpolating it. I don't know that for sure. But, yeah, I think they thought about it. And they maybe, thought about canceling practice or whatever so they wouldn't have to address it. But I think there's a history here. After the Draymond Durant thing, they addressed it the next day. Bob Myers went out of another game, and I was at that presser. He said, Draymond was suspended for a game. That's just happening. We just can't condone this kind of behavior. We love Draymond. I think this was a very similar situation. You don't delay it. If this is what you feel, you don't. And I also believe there's another aspect of this is they just don't. One, they don't want Draymond to keep doing it for sure. Two, they don't want Kuminga, Wiseman, Moody, and Poole to think, okay, this is the way we behave. This is it. This is the Warriors' standard. The Warriors feel they've got very different standards. And that's why I think, Myers and Kerr kept mentioning Steph. That's their standard. The standard isn't, Draymond going up and down, although however much they love him and how much he does lead them emotionally. The standard of behavior is Steph Curry. And they need that. And they need the other players to see that. And I think Steph signs off on it. And also Steph talking today means he's signing off on it. And how many times have they brought Steph out there to sign off on this? Many, many times. But again, that's his incredible value as a standard bearer, as the best player, as the guy who sets the tone. And today he did it too.
Tim Kawakami joining us here right off the rip today, talking about the story that we're talking about all afternoon long here, that there was a punch thrown and it's been heard around the entire NBA world. Do you think, and we know that Draymond on court represents so much of a defensive presence that he's always going to be a defensive leader, but do you believe that this is maybe a moment where he has abdicated actual leadership over this team?
Probably not emotional leadership. I can, he's going to be out there and he's going to be firing them up and he's going to be calling out the defenses and, the switches and the rotations. But I just think you just start to go to the actuarial table at some point, and, he's got a contract, he's got a player option for next season. Maybe he exercises it, maybe he doesn't. But at some point at his age and this stuff starts weighing it down, you just start thinking about, okay, who's next? And I'm not saying it's now, and I know he hates this conversation, but are you going to give him a 3-year extension after this? Are you giving him I don't know about that. I didn't think they were anyway. I think they were going to wait. I think there is some level of, is this who was going to get paid? Is this who they're going to tie themselves to? Is this what they really need for 3-4 more years? And if you are not that guy and other players start to feel that too, then you lose a lot of the leadership capabilities. You just do. It's by who's valuable, really. That's what it comes down to. It's by who is counted on. It's by who has the value, and also who inspires, and also by who knows the right answers and all those things. But it's a combination of the things. If Steph Curry wasn't Steph Curry, the player, he'd be a great guy. He wouldn't be the leader that he is. It's because he's both. Tim Duncan the same way, whatever you want to, go down the line on the great leaders in NBA history. If Draymond's play falls off a little bit as these episodes continue, I just think it's a progression of where the team thinks he is, what kind of contract they're willing to give him, what other players listen to. I don't know, is Jordan Poole going to listen to him? Everything he ever says, every time when he thinks he blew an assignment and starts screaming at him, there might be a different dynamic there. So yeah, I think it's in degrees. I think it's in, certain little aspects, but I think the idea of Draymond losing a little bit of that credibility, it begins to be part of the discussion.
In what ways then, and I'm asking you to project here, which is unfair, but that's the price you pay for answering the phone.
That's true.
In what way does this change the way that Steph Curry leads this team? Because he's usually been sort of the quiet guy who just, everybody looks to him, but he never has to say anything. Does this dynamic necessarily change how he approaches that part of his job?
Yeah, I think so. I think I wouldn't have thought so because he was such a presence when the Draymond Durant thing happened. It happened when he wasn't with the team, right? Then what's the next thing happened? He's with the team because he was hurt at the time. But I think Kerr and Myers really underlined that today, that Steph's become more vocal just in the last few years as they've accumulated these young players when Iguodala wasn't there. And I think there's some implication that Draymond, has been, his voice, I don't want to say is quieter, I don't want to say it means less, but I think it's certainly suggested when you say Steph's voice means more, that there was a voice there who was talking and his voice might be meaning less. And it is not like, hey, Draymond's always going to be important for every moment that he is a Warrior. And he will play great games and he will say things on the sideline that get guys going. But I think the emphasis that Steph Curry's voice is ringing louder, and it's his team. That's what Curry said. It's his team. It was always Steph Curry's, right? Nobody's going to dispute the Steph Curry's team for the last 13 years. But I think what they mean is he's not sharing it with Andre Iguodala and Sean Livingston and Zaza Pachulia and David West and Draymond Green. That ain't it anymore. It's Steph Curry. He's the guy everybody looks to. He's a North Star. And when the locker room is trying to figure out how they handle this, they're not looking at 6 different directions. They're looking at one, and it's Steph Curry. So, yeah, I think that has changed over the last few years. He's been the leader. He's been the most important guy. When he said anything, it mattered. I think he's just saying it more, and I think it is literally, the voice that means 15 times more than any other voice there, and that includes Draymond.
Hey, your voice means an awful lot to us, Tim. Thanks for sharing it with us today. I know you got some other duties right in front of you, so maybe we'll call you about the Niners tomorrow. But today it's Warriors all the time almost here. Thank you so very much.
You got it. Anytime, guys.
Tim Kawakami, right off the rip.